She had been an Elvis fan since 1954, but had never seen him live until her 90th birthday. Margaret's grandson had given her the greatest surprise. But when Elvis took the stage, what happened wasn't just a concert, it was time travel. That night, the 90-year-old elderly woman would disappear, and the young girl from the 1950s would emerge. It was a warm summer evening in Las Vegas, 1975. The International Hotel was buzzing with excitement as thousands of Elvis fans streamed through the entrance, their voices creating a symphony of anticipation. But among all those eager faces, one figure stood out, not because she was young and vibrant like most concert-goers, but because she was decidedly not. Margaret Wilson, at 90 years old, moved slowly through the crowd with the help of her walking cane, her silver hair perfectly styled, wearing her best dress, a navy blue outfit with pearl accessories that she had been saving for a special occasion. Her 25-year-old grandson, David, walked beside her protectively, his arm gently supporting her as they navigated through the bustling venue. To most people, Margaret looked like someone's sweet grandmother who had perhaps gotten lost on her way to a church social. But what they didn't know was that this frail-looking woman had been one of Elvis Presley's very first fans, and tonight was the culmination of a 21-year dream. Margaret's love affair with Elvis Presley began in 1954, when she was 69 years old, and Elvis was just a teenage boy with a revolutionary sound. She had been listening to the radio in her Memphis home when she first heard "That's All Right" on the local station. Something about that young man's voice had stirred something in her soul, a reminder of the passion and excitement she had felt as a young woman in the 1930s. At the time, Margaret was already a grandmother herself, having raised 3 children and being blessed with several grandchildren. Her friends thought it was amusing that a woman of her age would be interested in this new rock and roll music. But Margaret didn't care. There was something about Elvis's voice that made her feel young again, that connected her to the dreams and hopes she had carried as a teenager. For 21 years, Margaret had followed Elvis's career with the devotion of any fan half her age. She bought every record, watched every television appearance, and read every magazine article. Her living room was filled with Elvis memorabilia, albums, photographs, and newspaper clippings carefully preserved in scrapbooks. But despite her passionate fandom, Margaret had never had the opportunity to see Elvis perform live. In the early days, she lived too far from the venues, and as she aged, the logistics became increasingly difficult. Her children worried about her health, and the idea of traveling to concerts seemed impractical for a woman in her 80s. Still, Margaret never stopped dreaming. Every night she would listen to Elvis records and imagine what it would be like to see him in person, to hear that magnificent voice live, to be part of the magic that she had only experienced through radio and television. David Wilson had grown up listening to his grandmother's Elvis stories. From the time he was a small child, Margaret had shared her love of Elvis with him, playing the records and telling him about each song, each performance, each milestone in the King's career. David might not have inherited his grandmother's passion for Elvis, but he had certainly inherited her capacity for love and devotion. As Margaret's 90th birthday approached, David found himself searching for the perfect gift. What do you give a woman who has lived 9 decades and accumulated a lifetime of possessions? Then it hit him. The one thing his grandmother had always wanted but never been able to have, the chance to see Elvis Presley perform live. David spent weeks planning the surprise. He researched Elvis's performance schedule, arranged for premium seats, coordinated transportation, and even spoke with Margaret's doctor to ensure she was healthy enough for the trip. The logistics were complicated, but David was determined to make his grandmother's dream come true. On the morning of her 90th birthday, David arrived at Margaret's small apartment with a mysterious envelope. Margaret, expecting perhaps a birthday card or a gift certificate, was puzzled by her grandson's barely contained excitement. "Grandma," David said, his voice trembling with anticipation, "you've been the best grandmother anyone could ask for. You've shared your love of music with me, your stories, your dreams. Now I want to share something with you." Margaret opened the envelope with shaking hands and pulled out 2 tickets to Elvis Presley's concert in Las Vegas. For a moment, she couldn't speak. She simply stared at the tickets, reading and rereading the words as if they might disappear. "Are these real?" she whispered finally. "We're going to Las Vegas, Grandma," David said, tears in his eyes. "You're finally going to see Elvis." The flight to Las Vegas was Margaret's first time on an airplane, an adventure in itself for a woman born in 1885. She pressed her face to the window like a child, marveling at the clouds and the patchwork of fields below. But more than the novelty of flying, she was overwhelmed by the approaching reality of her dream. During the flight, Margaret shared stories with David that she had never told before, about her own youth, about the music and dances of her generation, about the dreams she had harbored as a young woman. She talked about how Elvis's music had brought those feelings back to her, how it had made her remember what it felt like to be young and full of hope. "You know, David," she said, holding his hand as the plane descended toward Las Vegas, "I've lived through 2 world wars, the Depression, the loss of your grandfather, and so many changes I can barely count them all. But Elvis's music has been like a thread connecting me to the girl I used to be." As they checked into their hotel and prepared for the evening, Margaret seemed to grow more energetic with each passing hour. The prospect of finally seeing Elvis was acting like a tonic, bringing color to her cheeks and a spring to her step that David hadn't seen in years. The International Hotel was a spectacle unlike anything Margaret had ever experienced. The lobby was filled with Elvis fans from around the world, young couples, families, groups of friends, all united in their love for the king of rock and roll. The energy was infectious, and Margaret found herself smiling at strangers and sharing her excitement with anyone who would listen. "This is my first Elvis concert," she told a young woman standing in line ahead of them. "I'm 90 years old, and I've been waiting for this moment for 21 years. Word of the 90-year-old Elvis fan began to spread through the crowd. People approached Margaret to hear her story, to take pictures with her, and to share their own Elvis memories. She became something of a celebrity herself, the embodiment of Elvis's multi-generational appeal and the power of music to transcend age. David watched with amazement as his grandmother blossomed in the attention. The frail, quiet woman he had been worried about was transforming before his eyes into someone vibrant and alive. It was as if the proximity to Elvis was already working its magic. As they made their way to their seats, premium spots just 10 rows from the stage, Margaret's excitement was palpable. She clutched her program tightly and kept looking around the venue in wonder, still hardly believing that she was really there. As the venue filled to capacity with 30,000 fans, the energy became electric. Margaret had never been part of such a large, excited crowd, and the experience was both overwhelming and exhilarating. She found herself caught up in the collective anticipation, clapping along with the crowd and joining in the chants for Elvis. David noticed something remarkable happening to his grandmother. Her posture was becoming straighter, her eyes brighter, her movements more fluid. It was subtle at first, but as the minutes passed, the transformation became more apparent. The elderly woman who had needed assistance walking into the venue was sitting up straight, tapping her feet to the music from the opening act, and looking around with the curiosity and excitement of someone much younger. "Grandma, how are you feeling?" David asked, concerned that the excitement might be too much for her. "Oh, David," Margaret replied, her voice stronger than it had been in years, "I feel like I'm 16 again. I feel like that young girl who used to dance to Glenn Miller and dream about romance and adventure. I don't know what's happening to me, but I feel more alive than I have in decades." The opening act finished their set, and the stage was prepared for Elvis's entrance. The lights dimmed, and 30,000 people held their breath in anticipation. Margaret reached for David's hand, and he was surprised by the strength of her grip. Then it happened. The moment Margaret had been waiting for since 1954. The lights went completely dark, and a hush fell over the massive crowd. Then a single spotlight illuminated the stage, and there he was, Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll himself, resplendent in his white jumpsuit that sparkled like diamonds under the stage lights. The crowd erupted into the loudest cheer Margaret had ever heard, but she barely noticed. Her entire focus was on the man on stage, the voice she had listened to for 21 years, finally paired with the physical presence she had only imagined. Elvis was everything she had dreamed he would be and more, commanding, charismatic, and radiating an energy that seemed to fill the entire venue. Thank you very much, Elvis said into the microphone, his voice carrying that unmistakable warmth and charm. "It's good to be back in Las Vegas." As Elvis began his first song, "That's All Right," the very song that had first captured Margaret's heart in 1954. Something extraordinary began to happen. The years seemed to melt away from Margaret's face and posture. Her back straightened completely. Her eyes became bright and clear, and a smile spread across her features that transformed her entire appearance. David watched in amazement as his 90-year-old grandmother began to move to the music with a grace and energy he had never seen in her. She was clapping in perfect time, swaying to the rhythm and singing along to every word. It was as if Elvis's presence had triggered some kind of temporal magic, bringing the young woman from the 1950s forward through time. As Elvis moved through his set list, Margaret's transformation became more pronounced. Song by song, she seemed to shed decades, her movements becoming more fluid, her voice stronger, her entire demeanor that of a much younger woman. People around them began to notice, staring in wonder at the elderly woman who was dancing and singing with the energy of someone 1/3 her age. During Love Me Tender, Margaret closed her eyes and swayed to the music, and David could swear he was looking at a teenage girl lost in her first romantic fantasy. Her face had taken on a glow that seemed to come from within, and her smile was radiant. "This is incredible," whispered the woman sitting next to them. "She looks like she's become decades younger." And she had. The transformation was so complete that David found himself looking back and forth between the vibrant woman beside him and his memories of his frail grandmother. It was still Margaret, but it was Margaret as she must have been in her youth, full of life, passion, and joy. During Hound Dog, Margaret actually stood up and began to dance, her movements surprisingly graceful and energetic. The people around them began to applaud not just for Elvis, but for the remarkable woman who was proving that age was just a number when it came to the power of music. Elvis Presley had performed for millions of people throughout his career, but even he had never seen anything quite like what was happening in the 10th row. During a brief pause between songs, his eyes were drawn to an elderly woman who was dancing and singing with more energy than fans half her age. Elvis had always prided himself on his connection with his audience, and something about Margaret's joyful, uninhibited celebration of the music touched him deeply. He could see that this wasn't just another fan enjoying a concert. This was someone experiencing pure, transcendent joy. Without breaking his performance rhythm, Elvis began to direct more of his attention toward Margaret's section of the audience. He made eye contact with her, smiled directly at her, and even pointed in her direction during "It's Now or Never," acknowledging her enthusiasm and energy. Margaret noticed Elvis's attention and responded with even more animation, waving at him and blowing kisses with the confidence of a young woman who knew she was beautiful and vibrant. The interaction between them became a highlight of the show for everyone watching. David couldn't believe what he was witnessing. His grandmother was flirting with Elvis Presley, and Elvis was flirting back. It was as if she had truly traveled back in time to become the young woman she had been in the 1950s. Then something even more extraordinary happened. During Can't Help Falling in Love, Elvis walked to the very edge of the stage, directly in front of where Margaret was standing and dancing. The crowd around her parted slightly, creating a clear line of sight between the king and his most remarkable fan. Elvis began to sing the song directly to Margaret, his eyes locked on hers, his voice carrying all the romance and emotion that had made him a legend. For those magical 3 minutes, it was as if there were only two people in the entire venue, Elvis Presley and Margaret Wilson. Margaret responded to Elvis's attention by singing along with him, her voice surprisingly strong and clear. The crowd around them fell silent, mesmerized by the interaction between the 40-year-old performer and the 90-year-old fan who had somehow become ageless. As the song reached its climax, Elvis did something unprecedented. He removed one of his signature scarves and threw it directly to Margaret, who caught it with the reflexes of someone decades younger. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Margaret only had eyes for Elvis, clutching the scarf to her heart as tears of joy streamed down her face. The moment was captured by photographers and would later become one of the most famous images in Elvis concert history. The king of rock and roll serenading a 90-year-old woman who had been transformed by the power of music into the young girl she had been decades earlier. For the remainder of the concert, Margaret remained in this state of temporal transcendence. She danced through every song, sang along to every lyric, and radiated a joy and energy that inspired everyone around her. Other concert-goers began taking pictures and videos of her, understanding that they were witnessing something truly special. David watched his grandmother with a mixture of joy and amazement. The transformation was so complete that he found himself forgetting her actual age. She moved like a young woman, laughed like a young woman, and carried herself with the confidence and vitality of someone just beginning her life rather than someone who had lived 9 decades. During Burning Love, Margaret's dancing became so energetic that she attracted the attention of Elvis's backup singers, who began dancing in her direction and encouraging her from the stage. The entire performance became a celebration not just of Elvis's music, but of the remarkable woman in the audience who was proving that music could indeed turn back time. As the concert neared its end, Margaret showed no signs of fatigue. If anything, she seemed to grow more energetic with each song, as if Elvis's music was a fountain of youth that was literally reversing the effects of aging. As Elvis prepared for his final song of the evening, he once again directed his attention to Margaret. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice carrying clearly through the venue, "tonight we've had a very special guest with us. In the 10th row, we have a beautiful young lady who has shown us all what it means to truly love music." The spotlight found Margaret, and 30,000 people erupted in applause for the remarkable woman who had become one of the stars of the show. Margaret waved and blew kisses to the crowd with the poise of a seasoned performer, completely comfortable in the spotlight. "This final song is for you, beautiful," Elvis said, speaking directly to Margaret. "Thank you for reminding us all what music is really about." Elvis closed the show with "Love Me Tender," and Margaret sang along to every word, her voice harmonizing perfectly with the King's. As the song ended and Elvis left the stage, Margaret continued to glow with an inner light that seemed to emanate from decades of accumulated joy, finally finding expression. The crowd around Margaret continued to applaud her long after Elvis had left the stage, recognizing that they had witnessed something truly magical. Many people approached her to express their amazement and to ask about her transformation. "How do you feel?" one young woman asked. "Like I'm 16 again," Margaret replied with a laugh that sounded decades younger than her actual age. "Like I could dance all night and never get tired." As the venue began to empty and the magical spell of the concert started to fade, David watched carefully to see if his grandmother would return to her previous frail state. But remarkably, much of the transformation seemed to be permanent. While Margaret was no longer quite as energetic as she had been during the height of the concert, she remained significantly more vital and youthful than she had been before the show. On the way back to their hotel, Margaret walked with a lighter step, requiring less assistance from David. Her voice remained stronger, her posture straighter, and her eyes brighter. It was as if the concert had not just temporarily transformed her, but had actually reversed some of the effects of aging. "David," Margaret said as they settled into their hotel room, "I don't think I'm the same person who walked into that concert hall tonight. Something has changed in me, something fundamental. I feel like I've been given a gift, not just the gift of seeing Elvis, but the gift of remembering who I really am underneath all these years." David looked at his grandmother, who was still clutching Elvis's scarf and glowing with an inner light that seemed to have taken years off her appearance. "You look different, Grandma. You look younger." "I feel younger," Margaret replied. "I feel like that girl who used to dream about dancing and romance and adventure. I feel like maybe it's not too late to have a few more dreams." The transformation that began at the Elvis concert proved to be more than temporary. In the weeks and months that followed, Margaret's family and friends marveled at the change in her. She had more energy, more enthusiasm for life, and seemed to have shed not just years, but decades. Margaret began taking dance lessons, something she hadn't done since she was a young woman. She started traveling more, visiting places she had always wanted to see. She even began dating again, something that shocked her family but delighted her friends at the senior center. "It's like Elvis gave her a second youth," David told his friends. "She's not just healthier and more energetic, She's genuinely become a different person, a younger person. Margaret became something of a local celebrity, featured in newspaper articles about the power of music and the importance of following your dreams at any age. She appeared on television talk shows, sharing her story and encouraging other seniors to pursue their passions regardless of their age. But perhaps most remarkably, Margaret's physical appearance continued to reflect her inner transformation. While she was still recognizably 90 years old, there was something in her face, her posture, and her movement that suggested someone much younger. People who met her for the first time often guessed her age to be in her 70s, and some even younger. Margaret's transformation attracted the attention of medical professionals who were fascinated by what appeared to be a genuine reversal of some aging processes. Dr. Sarah Chen, a gerontologist at the local university, conducted a series of tests on Margaret and found results that challenged conventional understanding of aging. Margaret's cardiovascular health has improved dramatically, Dr. Chen reported. Her muscle tone, bone density, and cognitive function are all significantly better than they were before the concert. While we can't scientifically prove that attending an Elvis concert caused these changes, the timing is certainly remarkable. The medical community began to study what they termed the Margaret Wilson phenomenon, looking into the potential connections between emotional fulfillment, musical engagement, and physical health in elderly populations. Margaret became an unwitting pioneer in research into the mind-body connection and the healing power of music. "I think what happened to me," Margaret told the researchers, "is that I remembered who I really am underneath all the years and experiences. When I heard Elvis sing, I connected with the part of me that has always been young, and that part took over." The research inspired new approaches to elder care, with many facilities incorporating more music and entertainment programming designed to help seniors connect with their younger selves. Margaret's experience at the Elvis concert fundamentally changed her philosophy about aging and life itself. She became an advocate for the idea that age was more a state of mind than a physical reality, and that it was never too late to rediscover the dreams and passions of youth. "People think that getting older means giving up on the things that make you feel alive," Margaret told audiences at the speaking engagements she began accepting. "But I learned that night with Elvis that the person you were when you were young is still inside you, waiting to come back out. Music can be the key that unlocks that door." Margaret began mentoring other seniors, encouraging them to pursue dreams they had set aside and to reconnect with the parts of themselves they thought they had lost to time. She organized trips to concerts, dance classes for seniors, and support groups for people who felt like they had lost their identity to aging. Her story inspired thousands of people, not just seniors, but people of all ages who had given up on dreams or who felt like they were too old to make significant changes in their lives. Margaret became living proof that transformation was possible at any age and that the right inspiration could literally turn back the clock. Margaret's story had a ripple effect that extended far beyond her own life. David, inspired by the change in his grandmother, quit his corporate job to become a music therapist, dedicating his career to using music to help people heal and transform. He often told people that watching his grandmother become young again at the Elvis concert had shown him the true power of music. The International Hotel began featuring Margaret's story in their promotional materials, and other elderly Elvis fans started making pilgrimages to Las Vegas, hoping to experience their own transformation. The venue even established a special section for senior citizens, recognizing the unique connection that older fans had with Elvis's music. Margaret's transformation also inspired musicians and performers to pay special attention to their older fans, understanding that their music could have literally life-changing effects. Elvis himself, when he heard about Margaret's story, was moved to tears and began dedicating songs to his senior fans at every concert. The story was eventually made into a documentary film that won several awards and inspired similar research into the healing power of music for elderly populations. Margaret became the face of a movement that challenged ageist assumptions and promoted the idea that vitality and passion were not limited by chronological age. Margaret Wilson lived for another 15 years after her magical night with Elvis, and she remained remarkably youthful and vital until the end of her life. She attended dozens more concerts, traveled the world, and maintained the energy and enthusiasm of someone decades younger until she peacefully passed away at the age of 105. At her funeral, David played "Can't Help Falling in Love," the song Elvis had sung directly to her that transformative night. As the music filled the church, those who had known Margaret could swear they saw her dancing one more time, young and beautiful and eternal. Her story became a legend in Las Vegas and beyond, proof that music has the power to transcend time, that dreams deferred are not dreams denied, and that the right moment of magic can literally turn back the hands of time. Margaret's scarf from Elvis was displayed in a place of honor at the senior center where she had volunteered, accompanied by a plaque that read, "Age is just a number when your heart stays young. Music is the fountain of youth." The concert that lasted just 2 hours changed Margaret's life forever. But more than that, it changed how thousands of people thought about aging, about dreams, and about the transformative power of music. Margaret Wilson had gone to her first Elvis concert as a 90-year-old woman, but she had emerged as proof that the right music, at the right moment, can make anyone 16 again.